Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs Podcast, where innovation meets sustainability. Building a better tomorrow today. We interview changemakers and visionary leaders redefining success for the planet. Here you'll find inspiring stories and solutions that matter. Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs Show. Today's guest is Eric Robb, founder of Cortex Construction, a company dedicated to building lasting structures that serve their occupants with a focus on sustainability, historical restorations, and off-grid projects. Eric and his team have been enhancing homes and businesses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area since 1999. Today we'll explore Eric's journey, the challenges of navigating administrative and regulatory costs, and his vision for building more sustainable structures. Welcome, Eric.
Morning.
Well, thank you for joining. Eager to learn more about Cortex Construction and your commitment to sustainable practices. To start, Cortex Construction has been operating since 1999. Could you share more about what inspired you to start your company and how your mission of building lasting structures has evolved over the years?
Well, the nature of my business has evolved. We've done a lot of insurance restoration and then lots of home flipping, and then COVID happened. So we're not really nailed down to a certain avenue and have had to change with the times quite a bit. But most of it is, we try to do things that I enjoy that interest me. So we've done a lot of green building, off-grid type projects. I like homesteading. We even raise chickens, everything like that.
Cool. Love that. And also too, apologies, I had an alarm that just went off. Okay. So with Cortex Construction, your focus includes sustainable building practices, historical restoration, and off-grid projects. How do these align with your mission and the needs of your clients?
Well, a lot of it's just efficiency. Life's gotten a whole lot more expensive lately, so anything that's inefficient is not good. And that can involve not having the right space for you. Either it's not efficient in terms of you've got the wrong space, or not efficient in terms of your utilities are killing you. There's just, for me, it's more of like geeking out on trying to just be super efficient. And I even kind of think about it like all those projects they did for like whatever, colonizing Mars. You know, how do you have everything in one bubble that sustains itself?
Yeah. So you're as an individual and as part of your company very focused on the efficiency, which also includes sustainability. You mentioned in the pre-form that your biggest success is your 4 children. How has balancing family life influenced your approach to running Cortex Construction?
Well, one of the entrepreneurial quotes I liked was, being an entrepreneur means being able to design the job that lets you live your life. But like most entrepreneurs, living my life right now is typically 60 hours of work a week on top of everything else. But yes, you're not punching a clock. If you need to do something in the middle of the day on Wednesday, why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can definitely appreciate designing the life, and also can empathize and understand that sometimes it's around the clock opportunities and responsibilities that come up. Administrative and regulatory costs are significant challenges in the construction industry. How have you navigated these obstacles, and what strategies have you found effective in managing these expenses?
Fortunately, the strategy I've found effective is spending lots of money. We don't have any problem complying with codes. But more and more often, cities don't do their own inspections. You have to hire engineers to do all the inspections. You have to have counter engineers almost that are designing them. And then you have to have another engineer over the top that's kind of like refereeing and making sure both these guys are doing the same thing. And we just wrapped up a job that all we needed to meet code was $500 worth of engineering. And we ended up spending $35,000. And if you're talking about sustainable, affordable, attainable, that number gets thrown on to the consumer, the renter, the homeowner, the building owner, 100%.
And what was it that drove those costs?
Just government doesn't understand the point of diminishing returns. They're increasingly, like I said, they don't want to spend their money sending somebody out there to say, yes, you did that wall framing properly. You have to hire an expert at your expense. Very simple stuff like that. And like I said, it just gets expensive. It's like we knew we had a sprinkler out of firewall to this last building. Pretty easy to figure that out, but we had to hire some super duper expert, not just to lay the whole thing out and do all these calculations that the cities used to do, but then to supervise and monitor and manage the whole process each and every step of the way. And fire safety engineers make a lot of money. I learned that on this last one.
Heard that. Keep that in mind if I ever need to find it.
Because again, what we were building firewalls, things like that. From a builder's engineering standpoint, it's super duper easy. It's not complicated at all.
Just tax on a lot of tax.
Yes.
Roger that. Looking forward, you aim to build more sustainable structures. Could you elaborate on your plans to incorporate sustainability into your projects and what innovations you're most excited about?
Well, I've got a lot of different rental properties, and so now I'm trying to. Solar panels are so cheap; they're cheaper than roofing per square foot. So I'm trying to incorporate solar panels into any sort of like awning, patio cover, greenhouse, shade structure, carport, you name it, is one of the things I'm trying to do here recently on several properties I own at the moment.
Cool. Any other kinds of innovations or anything else?
Well, I'm not innovating. I'm just kind of putting the things together. And again, we built completely off-grid stuff. I have work vans that have all their own solar and power inside, which is pretty helpful, as opposed to trying to lug around generators and things like that. And a lot of that stuff just gives you more flexibility, more reach. We've had some terrible ice storms the previous few years when you've got multiple sources of backup generation, not just to help provide for your household, but helping other people out as well. I like that. It's kind of there's a lot of prepping kind of mentality behind it. And I think of, well, you think of a battery like electric battery, that's one thing. You've got a certain capacity or load. Same thing when you've got a little extra food in the fridge and in the pantry, or a little bit more cash in the bank or whatever, just not being on the edge there and living below your means and having more power and redundant things in your toolbox there to get you over life's hurdles.
Yeah, absolutely. We just, in the area where I live, had a Hurricane Helene come through and knock out tons of the infrastructure with power, with water. So I very much have already appreciated, but even more so after off-grid and just more local sustainability. That way, people can actually not be so reliant upon, when really they don't have those reserves left over anymore. When communities don't have those reserves, how they're going to be able to function and still thrive.
Well, and one thing I don't see that you think you'd be seeing the next day, the government should be rolling with Chinooks dropping in generators, water purifiers, refrigeration units, all that stuff, that those three in particular that just disappeared, and I don't see them doing it.
Yeah, no, it took.
I mean, again, how could that, having those things in our collective arsenal, how does that not make sense?
Right, right. Yeah. It's very important. It was inspiring to see that a lot of community members took that on, and with assistance as well that came in. But all that aside too, with the historical restorations and off-grid projects or specialized areas, how do you approach these projects, and what unique challenges and rewards do they present?
I like history, architecture, everything else. We don't, and I think one of the most sustainable things you can do is use something for a long period of time. I don't know. You've probably seen a few of those notes on the environmental impact of somebody driving a well-maintained pickup for 25 years versus it having a brand new Tesla.
No.
Not like tearing things down and starting all over. Yeah, but we're about to do it's a 1908 house, but it's actually for the local city. It's in their park system. And a lot of the houses we flipped were some of these older houses in the Fort Worth area. So I have done dozens of those projects, but being a city, they don't know much about what's entailed with redoing a building like that. So I'm looking forward to that project here starting next week.
Amazing. And beyond sustainability, there's the cultural implications of having a building that's been around since 1908, and for the community there to be able to see that staple still part of their area and visit it. Or I'm not sure what kind of building it might be if they're actually getting to utilize it, but
yeah, it's just on a park trail. They have people can rent it for events. It's got public restrooms, so people going up and down the park system can use it. But it's also, again, one of the founder local, well, all these communities around here at one point was just a farm, homestead, whatever, that slowly expanded from there. There's a lot more, it feels like there's a lot more intelligent design that went into a lot of those old things than they have today. Because, they didn't have air conditioning, a lot of things. I mean, even electricity, I guess, was pretty new back then. One interesting thing I heard the other day is 100 years ago, everybody lived off the grid.
right. Yeah.
And now, we had about a 24-hour strike of the dock workers on the West Coast, I believe. lasted about 24 hours. And I was in Costco and I saw the bundles of toilet paper in an aisle and it says limit one per customer. So I was like, geez,
Yeah. Yeah.
thin veneer of civilization.
Yeah, they didn't have global trade back then. They had to be much more self-reliant and rely upon one another in their local communities.
And prepared for disaster, you know? Because if you didn't, you'd starved.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No FEMA, no helicopters coming in during then.
No doubt. You know, the biggest thing would be the government getting out of our way, which is just not going to happen. I've seen some cities in California being helpful. They're allowing ADUs, but they actually have the plans and everything you need to submit and build to make the city happy. In other words, you don't have to go through that compliance. All, you know, that alone could cost $10,000, $50,000, getting the government happy on a project, because you got to hire all those different experts and architects and get all that stuff in there where they're happy with it. A lot of cities here, the planning departments in particular, are just completely dysfunctional. City of Dallas was 6 to 9 months behind on permitting, and they just had to withdraw a bunch of permits they accidentally issued. You can imagine if you're that investor or builder in the middle of a project and now you might have to bulldoze it. It's horrible. And, yeah, we want. They all say we want affordable housing as long as it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath brick home with a 2-car garage and single family. And even all the time, it's like I just like getting my calculator out on things you hear all the time. Like Dallas is building an affordable housing community, and it's 300 units and it's $9 million. And I'll just get it out. It's like, that's $300K per apartment. How it's and then, or you see something else where they're putting people in sheds for $5,000, and it's like, no, it really ought to be about it could be done for $100,000, like a reasonable living situation. But not for 5,000, and 300,000 is not sustainable. That's just a burden on the taxpayer and another kind of garbage in, garbage out government function.
Any kind of projection can you see? You said that it's not so likely, but through either more just like private equity or anything else that looks like it's going to help you kind of get out of the government stronghold.
No, I mean, it's just something we're saddled with. We have to deal with here. You can always move out in the county in Texas. You don't have to comply with much out there, but that's not where I live. That's not where that's not my home, so to speak. And a lot of things need to be get done here, and the better, more efficiently we can do it, the better. But yeah, it's one of those things, like you always see where, oh, this city's given a massive tax abatement to this big time company coming to town. You'll never hear them just like getting out of the way of the small businesses or doing anything to help the small guys at all. And the same is true of so many things. It's so slow for them to move. They can only focus on a small number of big projects. But really, that's not what makes things happen, especially in the short term. Redevelopment's a huge deal right now. I have a friend who's building 1,500 apartments. They're 100% 1-bedrooms. And just the number of people per household is tiny compared to what it was just a generation or two. But yet the existing housing doesn't comply with that. Even retail shrinking. All the new Walgreens, CVS, you name it, are a half or a quarter of the size they were before.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. A lot more online shopping happening.
Sure.
Well, to check with your clients, how do you educate clients about the benefits of sustainable building practices? And do you see opportunities to deepen this engagement?
Again, here's another thing. If the people can afford it, want it. It's hard to think in a 30-year term if you're kind of living at a subsistence level. Obviously, it makes sense to build things that aren't going to fall down in 10 years or require a lot of maintenance or a lot of energy. But much like who's going to buy these quote unquote efficient vehicles is the people that can afford them, and not the average person running around. So if you can, people generally do the long-term sustainable thing if they can afford to.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess in closing, I'm curious what excites you most about the future of Cortex Construction and the impact you're making in the construction industry.
We've kind of pivoted for about the 15th time to where we're, like I said, home flipping right now is pretty dead. Money's very expensive. So we're pivoting to more municipal jobs in particular, because they seem to always be spending money and all that. It's a lot more regulation and expense, and especially insurance, tremendous insurance costs, which again is always ultimately passes straight through to the citizen. But they are thinking more long term, just because, it might be 20 years before they can have another budget meeting or set aside money to do something. So or they're probably 20 years behind and redoing something, a building that they've already owned for 50 years. It's not that they're insensitive to cost, but they know that it's not something like your house where you could paint it a different color at a whim 5 years later. And then it needs to be done where it's gonna last for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to check too, anything that I didn't think to ask you on, or anything else that you'd be excited to share about in the general fields that we've been covering?
No, I mean, I'm just like a lot of people. I'd like to, what do you want to do when you retire? Well, I love those earthships and Taos and things like that. I mean, I just like doing those little kind of projects, and it's a lot of fun. I like building stuff. Really kind of scratches your creative itch. And also, like I said, it's pretty cool when you drive by 30 years later and you see something that you did that's still there and doing well. That's a pretty nice affirmation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've seen a lot of things torn down, just like we're on our third baseball stadium in my short lifespan here. I'm just redoing things that are perfectly good just because the needs are changing. Like nobody wants to sit outside and watch baseball in the Texas summer anymore. We just can't handle it like we used to.
Well, I appreciate you for sharing your journey with us, and I look forward to seeing how Cortex Construction continues to innovate and lead in building sustainable, lasting structures.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. And you can call that the recorded portion. If there's anything else that you're curious to chat about or anything before.
No, I haven't watched any of your deals, but like I said, I geek out on this stuff all the time. So I'm always watching hempcrete and rammed earth building, all that kind of stuff. But again, I don't think we're going to be building houses within city limits to any significant level anytime, and even in the next generation.
Yeah.
I see some things like 3D printing stuff that's making some progress, but yeah, I lost a ton of money doing a foray into modular building. And like, even if you go on Google or AI now and you say, what are the new building trends? And it says modular, offsite building. They've been saying that for 100 years. The percentage of building that's done offsite or modular hasn't changed in 100 years. It's been very consistent through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the whole way. And offsite building is very difficult too, because you're having to comply with those same government regulations without them being there looking over you. So you really can't do it on a small scale. It's got to be a much larger scale, like mobile home building, or it gets really complicated. And like everything, once you make it complicated, it's no longer reasonable. And part of the reason I bowed out of building things like tiny homes was it was all the work and effort and expertise and compliance of building a traditional home for a fraction of the sale.
There's a fella, and I'm so interested how I might be able to develop or just like utilize technology to help, like, where I would love to, like, all the conversations I have, and as the network continues to build out, how to patch people together with today. And like, there's a fella in California, he does these they're custom prefabs, but it's just it's like a few different designs that they'll utilize. And so when people or it's not just like a few different designs, but it's like a few ways that you can change it about, but you actually can like customize the home versus just like changing the cabinetry or something like that. You actually can change out the layouts. And he says that his building times are drastically reduced, and it's he says he just gets a lot of traction with it. People are really appreciating it, but I love to be able to like.
I've seen several of those cool systems, and the really cool ones are like the geodesic domes, because you basically have a triangle, and it could be the same triangle making a big dome, small dome. Here's a window triangle, here's a door triangle, here's a wall triangle. Just cranking out triangles, and then you go on your site, and it's like you're a kid with a set of Legos.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. But again, the only geodesic domes I've seen around here were built in the 70s, and they're kind of funky. It's kind of like Napoleon Dynamite's house. But yeah, some of that stuff was super cool. But I'm a little actually seeing it happen at scale. It just never seems to happen. It's always this little test village, and it doesn't seem to move past that. But you see a lot of traction, I guess, over time, because it's been forever with the Earthship type designs, and you can use a lot of those principles and not build it out of beer cans and tires. But again, you're fighting the government on zoning, and how things have to look a certain way, and oh no, it has to be a brick house, and it has to have a 2-car garage, and it has to be this, and it has to be that.
I fully appreciate any effort that you're putting into it, because I do think that I think home building is such a important. There's so much. It's such a lasting kind of structure, and by using good practices and good materials, we're creating a much more sustainable lifestyle for people in general, but especially the individuals who live in the homes. So I appreciate any kind of effort that you're putting into this, and having to work with all the bureaucratics and everything, all the challenges that you come up against.
Yeah, sure. There's a guy local is kind of one of my inspirations. His name Monty Anderson with Options Real Estate. Now he's not necessarily all about building green, although anything you build today, the new standards for insulation and everything else, obviously much higher. I've, redid houses that were built in the 50s had zero insulation in Texas. So, but what he's really doing is like the changing needs. Like I said, there's more people need smaller spaces, and you can't just go buy 2,000 square foot house and turn it into a duplex. The government never let you do it. So he's found some interesting things to do to get around those sort of things too. So might look at him up, but he's all about redeveloping communities. Like, let's not walk away from them. Let's not let them go to rot. Let's preserve them and keep changing the use to change for the changing needs of society.
Yeah, as it needs to be adaptable, almost living communities, really able to change and adapt with the times.
People are, it used to be every apartment had a tennis court, and they tore them out and never had to have a dog park. 50 years ago, people living at home in an apartment didn't have dogs. Now everybody's got a dog. I do a lot of these midterm, short-term rentals. 90% of people coming with a dog. And now it's pickleball, so I guess we're getting our tennis courts back.
Yeah.
But one thing for sure, just lots and lots of people, either one or two people per household. Massive increase in the numbers on that.
Yeah.
A lot faster than we can change our inventory of housing.
Be interesting to see how it all adapts and integrates together.
Sure.
Awesome. Your time here. I'm gonna be about to put out this first batch of episodes next week or two. So I'll update you once yours is up and live.
Yeah, I'm sure. Just curious. I didn't look you up or watch any of your other podcasts. I've been on a few different podcasts, but I'd be curious to check that out.
Yeah.
And I am always interested in interesting materials. For me, it's a lot of just recycling, reusing materials, scavenging stuff up when I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that circular economy, deconstruction. There's one fella, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he does these things called smart walls that it's all recycled material. It even recycles wastewater inside the whatever building structures they're doing, residential or commercial. And then it's they're growing plants, so like local food, but just like microgreens, and they're diversifying what else can be produced there too. But that's all modular. It really cuts down on construction time as well. Just an interesting kind of building material to work with. Or
that hydroponic, aquaponic, aeroponic stuff. I've messed around with it myself. It's really fascinating. It's just hard to figure. Again, it's one of those things everybody loves, everybody talks about. They're even getting donations and doing it, but I just haven't seen it. The best thing is something that makes you money. And the same thing, like I'm looking for a vehicle. What do you need this vehicle to do? I need this vehicle to make me money, which may be getting me to work, or it being a work vehicle, or just it's the least expensive thing that gets what I need done. The same thing for housing. I can't afford housing, what if you could find a way to make more money with your house, take on a roommate, do this, do that. That gets pretty complicated. But like some of the things I've built is like for people, for investors, for Airbnb to increase their density on their lot, things like that to make money. Because I can tell you as an investor right now, you can't run out there and buy a residential house and rent it and make a dime. Just can't do it right now. But by the same token, what if you're somebody struggling to buy a property and you need to find some way to leverage it to make that happen for you? Because I just hate waste. I'll sit there, wash my hands at the kitchen sink, and I'm watching my water sprinklers in the backyard, and I know my water bill is going to be $150, but I also know my just simple washing my hands water's going right down to the city sewer system, where it's going to get processed and all kinds of stuff. But you can imagine if you try to do kind of gray water things in city limits, they would lose their shit. That would be like treating it like it's a nuclear waste dump. So You just got to do that stuff on small scale and quietly under the radar.
Hats off to you again for playing in the world. I don't come up against all the bureaucratics of of those kinds of systems. I'm going down to Costa Rica this winter to study different eco villages and see some of the building practices, as well as just the whole kind of, I guess you almost call it like the bureaucratics of communal living, but just, yeah, some of the different living structures and systems that they utilize, see what could be maybe implemented in the United States more so. And
Well, a lot of what they do, and again, this is the way everybody did it 100 years ago. What are your local materials? What are that percentage of the stuff in the grocery store near your house like came from within 100 miles? Like very little. There are a lot of things is processed and packaged and repackaged and frozen and shipped and trucked and this, that, and the other. So this 100-year house I'm redoing, they wanted to try to use these like cement board products, which are fine in some cases. But here in Texas, we grow southern yellow pine. That house has southern yellow pine siding that's been on there for 100 years. It's the local material, the one to reuse for a reason. Some of these materials, they're not really better necessarily than they were before, especially if you're talking about things like lumber and all that are, grown like crops. But yeah, I mean, it's always best to reuse what you got or try to minimize the amount of concrete you need, trying to find materials locally for fill or whatever. Trying not to throw stuff away, trying to prevent other people from throwing stuff away. My neighbor does highway construction. He had 20,000 pounds of gravel in his trailer, and he goes, "Do you need any of this?"
oh my gosh.
And I was like, damn it, I hate that I don't, but yeah, what would I do with it, kind of a thing. But people pay a lot of money for that. And I was like, why don't you put it out there and just sell it delivered for $500? Like that stuff costs a fortune. You go to the store. He says, man, I'd be in so much trouble with the government if I did that. They're going to pay me to throw this away. And that's the way it works.
Yeah, not designed for sustainability.
No. Oh, another thing that drives me crazy. You think with AI and Waze and Google, we know where every little car's going, right? Every time it slows down, every time it turns at a slight degree and all that. You think our road design's getting better?
Not yet.
And here they've screwed up all the standard roads to make room for these toll roads that are taxpayer boondoggles and just made the whole situation worse $1 trillion later. It's insane. I had a friend from Shanghai here 7 or 8 years ago when they were just starting a lot of road construction near me. And I said, this is supposed to take 7 years. It might be 10. And she looked at me like I just said something, the stupidest thing she ever heard. Like that doesn't even make sense. It should be a 6-month project.
Yeah. We have an infamous highway that's been under construction, I think, for almost a decade here in the North Carolina. It's I-26. It's just been almost, it seems, indefinitely under construction.
Well, and you guys had that massive flood, and insurance companies don't cover that, which is bananas to me. Every time I read an insurance policy, it's like, we don't cover giant meteors. It's like, that's the one thing I do want you to cover, because how can I predict and plan for that?
Right.
I mean, you guys were in a 1 in 5,000 year flood deal, whatever. It was just an anomaly, and now just entire community's gone. And in that situation, it's not like you're going to rebuild it on stilts or something like they should in some of these like hurricane zones. Obviously, it was just a fluke. But they had Galveston got wiped out with this massive flood in 1900. And about 10 years later, they'd rebuilt the whole town, seawalls, the whole town. They rebuilt it like 15 feet higher with steam shovels and mules, probably. I don't think you could do anything like that today. Because, we've seen where the government will spend $1 trillion, something that's supposed to be $1 trillion, and it's just a tunnel. And then 10 years later, it's $8 trillion and it's still not done. So as taxpayers, how can we rebuild our infrastructure if we're paying 37 times what it ought to cost? Same thing. You can't afford it.
Right.
So, all right, man.
All right, Eric.
Have a great day.